So, okay, so what you feel is that there should have been a conversation that was had. Like, he should have made the initiative to sit down and have a conversation with you to talk about the expectations. And I think sometimes what happens is, like I said, is that I think there's this fear of boundaries of, do I really have, and I think too, it makes it difficult, even more difficult. I don't think it's impossible, but when you come into a home and there are children who are almost adults or who are teenagers, I think because you're already going through that process of trying to find yourself, you're already going through that process of, attitudes, up and down mood swings. And so I think as step parents and even as parents in general, a lot of times we'll take that personal. And so there's all these thoughts probably going on in his head about, okay, should I talk to her? Shouldn't I talk to them about it? Should I see where we stand? How is this going to, what is this going to turn into? Is this going to turn into a phone call, a text, an email? Is this going to turn into a high conflict situation? So I think sometimes as step parents, we'll take the step back approach where and sometimes we'll allow the influence of what other people are saying and what other people's suggestions are, because I have found there are a lot of people who just believe, oh, that's her kids, or that's his kids, or let them handle that, and you step back when it's this and let them do that. And so I think sometimes if we surround ourselves around people who have that same mindset, then we'll start to behave that way, and we'll miss the important part, which is what you're saying, is establishing a relationship, and helping fulfill that role as a parent. I take my role as a parent very seriously. You know that about me. So when I signed up to marriage, I signed up for the entire family. It wasn't, oh, this is your
that's
son.
What I'm saying. That's how I feel it should be. It's like,
right.
You don't just marry him and not
right
other children.
Exactly. And so I can understand how that probably made you feel, if you are not if a person isn't taking the time out to get to know you, to get to understand you, to develop a relationship outside of the normal parenting day-to-day role. And sometimes, like I said, it could be because they themselves feel rejected. They think, oh, you don't want to be bothered with me, you don't want to talk to me, you don't want to deal with me, and they take it personal instead of understanding that you're going through your own challenges of trying to sort through things in your head. My parents are no longer together. Now I'm dealing with a step parent. I'm dealing with new family. And I'm also going through my own thing as a teenager. I'm developing. I'm changing. I'm going through hormonal changes. I'm, trying to decide on my career, what I'm going to do after high school. All of these things at the same time can be overwhelming for anyone. And I think as parents sometimes, if we only get caught up on one particular thing that might be our focus in the relationship or the marriage or the family, sometimes we'll lose sight on what's happening all around us with the other elements. And that goes back to, parents aren't perfect. We don't get a manual, just like, kids aren't perfect. We all have our challenges. But I appreciate so much that you're expressing that, because it's probably going to help someone else understand that necessarily taking the high road and saying, oh no, I'm not going to be involved, or no, I'm going to let them handle that. In the end, you could hurt, the child by doing that.
And I think too, it goes to also, something that I like to say, and that I tell my own dad, is like, it's no longer really how you feel when it comes to your children. Like, if you offended someone or they want something from you, from like the emotional department, or just as being a father, like, you really not bump your feelings, but you should really like get out your own feelings, think about the child. I think like those conversations are necessary, or I at least feel like it's necessary beforehand. Like, it could have been before, because I don't feel like before I was rude or nasty. It was more so like after everything was like transpiring, where like I probably did like the whole 180. And so it's like, but even then I'm like, okay, now reflecting back, I'm like, okay, well, it could have still happened, but it didn't, so it's like fine. But I'm saying like beforehand, like I felt like before it gets anywhere, if you want to take it to the next level, I think some point in time before like it gets more serious, that conversation should be happening if you expect to like marry like him or her, whoever you're.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think that's good. I think that's good food for thought for, us as well as, other families. What are some of the good things that you could take out of what if, out of our situation?
Things I think was, now that I'm older, I feel like making sure that like when I'm whole getting into something when it comes to relationships, and then also gave me a better idea of kind of what I want and what I don't want, and also made me put more thought before I just jump into things,
Right.
especially knowing like that your end goal and your end purpose to be marriage. Like it kind of just made me more like harder in that department because I don't want a divorce. I've seen how it's happened,
Right.
and I don't want to bring kids in anything to where if I feel we're gonna get divorced like 5-6 years later, like I don't want to do that. So I would hope that the person I marry is like on the same page as me.
Right. I agree with that. That's good. What is there? Was there ever a time? You know, I'm really big on this about making sure that everybody's treated equally. You know, I'm like a huge like component for that, and I think that has a lot to do. I believe that how we respond as parents, how we act as parents, have a lot to do with our upbringing, our environment, you know, all of those kind of things. And I know for me, I felt like it was so important to make sure that everybody was treated equally, whether you lived in the home, whether you didn't live in the home. Primarily because I remember going through that transition as a kid of being bounced from home to home, and everybody made me feel like I belonged. There was never a home that I went to where I felt like I was the cousin or I was the niece. It was always I felt like I was the daughter, I was a part of the family. But even in their efforts, I remember still feeling so alone because I didn't live with my biological parents. And I felt, and it wasn't because they did anything, but it was just because of what I felt inside. I knew in my mind that I was supposed to be with my mother. My father had passed away when I was 1, so I never got a chance, an opportunity to know him. But I always felt like I didn't fit in. And so no matter what they did to make me feel like I should fit in, I didn't feel that way. When you went through the process of your parents divorcing, you're now in this new family, was there ever a time where you felt like I don't belong here, that, you know, they have their own little family going on, or, you know, he's not accepting of me, or his family isn't accepting of me, or was there ever a time where you felt that, or my mom is, you know, is not accepting me and my 3 siblings who were with my father, but she's more, you know, toward the situation with, you know, her husband and my stepbrother and, you know, their new child that they have together?
Not really. It was just more of wanting it to like always feel like one huge family and not like divided.
Oh man, it's funny that you say that, because that was my same thought.
Because I was always just like, oh, like everyone would be one big happy family. Yes. That's how I would want it. Like the other mom would come over, like have Christmases. You'd be like, it's not normal, but it should be normal. Like So I think just the one big family. Right. No,
it's funny that you said it, because that was my thought too. I remember I had this vision that, you know, it was going to be that way. That,
because I think I've seen it, like, with our cousins, like, how, like, they're,
like... Oh, right, that's true.
Like, you would never know.
Right, you would never know. Right, exactly.
So, so I always, like, looked at that as an example of, like, okay, like, I feel like that's healthy.
Right. And I think what happens, though, is... And I learned this through my whole blended experience, because like I said, even though I moved from home to home, I was still with blood, I was still with family. I never felt like I wasn't a part. But going through this whole blended process, I've learned that even though in my mind and my desire for the blended family is to be operating as one, to love on one another, where you're blood or not blood, to love unconditionally, that everybody doesn't accept the blend. You know, everybody doesn't see it as family. It warmed my heart when we went to Tyree's, the ceremony that she did, and your grandmother held Chandler and kissed her and said, "This is Grandma." You know, that was like, I was like, wow. You know, that to me, that's what family is about. It's about not seeing the bloodline. Yeah. It's about saying we're family because we're connected and we're going to be there for one another. And I think the whole blended process, at the very beginning, it was very challenging for me, because I remember going through that process where I was angry, I was frustrated. I was like, this isn't what, you know, I thought it was going to be like. You know, I thought it was going to be so much unity. But at the same time, when it came to a lot of the high conflict situation between your father and your stepfather, I have to blame myself for some of that. So, you can't say, oh, I want a peaceful situation, but then you are contributing to the fire that's burning.
Yeah.
And so once I was able to recognize that and correct a lot of those mistakes related to that situation, there still was so many different variables, that was going on outside that prevented us from being able to live out that vision that I had. Because again, you can't force other people to accept your situation. Mm-hmm. You can't force other people to love the way you love, to think the way you think. And so in that process, when you're dealing with the blend, you almost have to, like you said, sit down and have that conversation about what are your expectations for this family? What are your expectations for this circumstance? Because you may go in it with these high level expectations, and then everything comes underneath your expectations, and there's all this disappointment, there's all this hurt, there's all this feeling of rejection. And so, but I'm glad to know that it wasn't what you were feeling was more of expectations that you had, within yourself, not necessarily that anybody treated you badly, or didn't treat you like you belonged, but it wasn't the unified family that you were used to. It wasn't the unified family that you had envisioned.
Yeah.
Right. So, and now that we fast forwarded, now that you're an adult, what would you say that you think the blended family is something that can work, that will never work, that what do you think about the whole? Is it something you're like, man, I would never, I wouldn't do this. I wouldn't do this to my worst enemy.
No,
what goes in your head when you think about?
I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing. Like, I've talked to people who had children, so it's just like it doesn't bother me. I just want to make sure that that person is okay with it. And sitting down with the other parent, I don't really believe in, including the grandparents and all that, because it's not their marriage, but I feel like at least the main people who are going to be affected, that you're marrying in the child, I feel like if I was, going to have to marry someone that had children, that's what I probably want to do, and I think it could definitely work if, everyone is mature and, knows the end goal and know the disrespect, everyone respects each other. I don't see why it shouldn't work. I think it's bad to say, oh, we can't be one big happy family, because I think that's a lie you're telling yourself.
Exactly.
I don't believe that. I think God knew people are gonna get divorces, and I don't think His intentions ever for us to be angry and just unhappy. So I think His end goal is for everyone to love each other. So I don't see why not it couldn't work. I feel like it's how you respond and how you think about situations to where it doesn't work or it does work.
Right. Now, you just said something that I'm going to have to touch on. You said that you don't think that necessarily the grandparents need involvement.
No.
Right. So help me understand that. What is your thought about that?
When I say that, I feel like when you start to include other parties, not saying you not going to take their advice or listen to them, but it's if you're going to sit down with them about your marriage, are you going to be prepared to what they do have to say and what they don't have to say? Are you going to allow what they have to say to affect your marriage? Because you're not marrying your husband's mom and your husband's dad. You're marrying their son.
Right.
So, or vice versa. So, to me, if I was coming in a blended family, if he wants to sit down with your parents, but, I'm going to be honest, I don't think that you should have to include your parents in everything. If you're arguing, you're gonna call your your mom every 2 seconds, or you're I feel like you should handle it as your household, or at least start like that. I don't think there's anything wrong with going to your mom or your dad to talk to them, but I think to include them into every bitty thing. At some point, I feel like you guys have to cling to each other and not. And I thought that's what God kind of wanted, for y'all to be one, not one in other two parties.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Right. Now, I do agree with you in that, in the sense of, first of all, the blended family is already so complex, because you already have, you already have the dynamic of you and your spouse, and then the co-parents who are outside of the home. So that's already 4 parents.
I feel like at least if it involves the children, just involve those 4. It doesn't mean
it's already very complex, because you already have the opinions of 4 people in a home that is typically designed for just 2.
Yeah.
And then when you go and you have the grandparents involved, or the the cousin, the auntie, the friends, and they're all giving their opinion, it can become overwhelming as far as trying to make the right decision that's best for your family, because not everyone has the same vision for your family.
It can also lead to your spouse feeling like unheard. Like if you go say something and you talk to your mom about it, and your mom has that opinion, like, oh, let me listen to my mom, and it trumps what your spouse says, like that can cause friction between those three when it didn't have to be like that.
Right. And I remember we went through that early on in our marriage, where we had that dynamic of everyone wanting to give their opinion about how they felt like we should operate, and that can become dysfunctional for the marriage, and it could also become dysfunctional for the home, because there's that stress factor of trying to now it's not even about doing what you had originally talked about as the vision for the family, but now it's about trying to please what this other person is telling you that you should do, trying to please that person and do what that person wants you to do versus doing what you know is right for your family. Because at the end of the day, when you think about it as being, in your 20s, you're not holding grandparents accountable. You're holding me and your stepfather accountable. You're not saying, oh, well, grandma, granddad, or, auntie or uncle, didn't do. It's, you're holding us accountable. And that's who is held accountable at the end of the day, But I think sometimes what happens is because, we don't know what to do many times, is we'll reach out to sources that we think does have the answer. And you have to be careful with that, because if they don't have the same desire for your family as you do, or you believe they have the same desire and it's a different desire based on whatever factors, then it could be damaging to your situation and cause even further dysfunction. So hopefully, in the end, if you decide to end up being in a blended family, I promise I will not be overwhelming. But I'm sure I will be there to give you advice if you ask for it. But thank you so much for being willing to share.